My name is Dylan Foster. You might know me from my podcast, Noise Pollution. It started as a passion project, exposing corruption, giving a voice to the voiceless, amplifying the sounds that people try to bury. But somewhere along the way, I must have spoken too loudly, drawn too much attention, because now I'm trapped, and no one can hear me. It started like any other day. I had just wrapped up an episode about missing hikers in Montana, a string of disappearances that had left nothing behind. No bodies, no clues, just people vanishing into the wilderness. The theories ranged from serial killers to strange cults to something even more unsettling. But I wasn't the kind to buy into myths. I believed in evidence, in connecting the dots. And the dots had led me to an abandoned cabin deep in the woods. I remember the drive. Miles of emptiness stretched on either side, the sky pressing down heavy and gray. My GPS had stopped working an hour ago, leaving me with nothing but a hand-drawn map from an old local who warned me not to go poking around. "Some places are quiet for a reason," he muttered, his fingers trembling as he slid the map across the table. I laughed it off. I had done my research. The cabin had once belonged to a man named Walter Keene, a reclusive sound engineer with a strange obsession. He had worked on horror films, designing soundscapes meant to unsettle, to make silence feel like a living thing. Then, one day, he disappeared, just like the others. The cabin appeared through the trees like something out of a dream, wood rotting at the edges, windows covered with thick black curtains. There was no sign of life. No birds, no rustling leaves. Just stillness. A heavy kind of silence that pressed against my skin. I stepped inside, my recorder clutched in my hand, narrating every detail. Dust floated in the air, disturbed only by my breath. The floor creaked beneath me, the sound swallowed too quickly, as if the walls were drinking it in. A workbench sat against the far wall, covered in old radio equipment, tangled wires and cassettes labeled with names of the missing. Then I heard it, a noise, small but deliberate, a footstep that wasn't mine. I turned too late. Something slammed into the back of my head, and the world cracked apart. When I woke up, the silence was absolute. I was in a room, not just any room, a cell. The walls were thick, padded with layers of material that devoured every sound. I screamed. I banged my fists against the door, but the noise never left the space, never echoed. It was as if my own voice had been stolen from me. Then, through the darkness, a voice crackled to life, a recording playing from a hidden speaker. "You make too much noise," it said, "but don't worry, you'll learn." The voice was calm, almost kind, but there was something else beneath it, something hollow and endless. I scrambled to my feet, feeling along the walls, searching for a weakness, a way out. My fingers found something cold, something metallic. A microphone. He wanted me to talk. I don't know how long I've been here. Time doesn't move in the silence. I only know that I'm not the first. I found the scratches on the walls, the desperate carvings of those who came before me. I traced the names with my fingers, my chest tightening. Some of them I recognized. A journalist, a musician, an activist, people who had made noise, who had refused to be silent. Now I understand this isn't just a kidnapping, it's a collection, and I am the latest piece, but I won't go quietly. I still have my recorder. And if you're listening, if my voice is reaching you through whatever means it can, then I need you to hear me. I need you to find me. Before I become nothing but an echo. The first thing I became aware of was the cold. It clung to my skin, creeping into my bones like something alive, something patient. The air was heavy with it, thick and unmoving, as if I had been sealed inside a space where time itself had stopped. My head throbbed with a deep, pulsing ache, the kind that burrows in and makes a home of you. And when I lifted my hand to touch the back of my skull, my fingers came away sticky. I couldn't see the blood, but I knew it was there. The metallic scent of it lingered in the air, a whisper of violence in a place that otherwise held no sound at all. I tried to listen for anything, any small noise that might tell me I wasn't alone, but the silence here was unnatural, absolute. There were no echoes, no distant hum of electricity, no shuffle of unseen creatures in the corners. It was as if the very concept of sound had been erased from existence. I opened my mouth, inhaled sharply, and forced out a breathless, panicked, "Hello?" But the sound was wrong. It died the moment it left me, swallowed whole by the walls before it could truly exist. My own voice sounded like a stranger's, something fragile and fleeting, barely a ripple in the endless quiet. I moved slowly, my limbs stiff and heavy, my body protesting every inch as I forced myself upright. The room was small. No, smaller than small. A cell. I reached out, fingers brushing against the walls on either side, feeling the strange, dense material that covered them. Not concrete, not wood. Something softer, something layered. Soundproofing. The realization sent a shiver through me, a slow trickle of ice spreading through my gut. This wasn't just a room. It was a place designed to hold sound captive, to suffocate it before it could escape. My hands fumbled along the wall, desperate for anything. A crack, a seam, a doorknob. But there was nothing. Just the same suffocating material pressing in on all sides. My breath came faster now, too loud in the emptiness, my own body betraying me with the noise it made. I forced myself to focus, to think past the panic clawing at my throat. I needed to understand where I was, who had taken me, what they wanted. And then I remembered the voice. "You make too much noise. But don't worry. You'll learn." I swallowed hard, trying to steady my breathing, trying to force the fear into something manageable. He had spoken to me. That meant he was listening. Somewhere beyond these walls, beyond this silence, there was someone waiting for me to break. The thought made my skin crawl. I closed my eyes, trying to piece together what had happened before I woke up here. The cabin, the workbench covered in old radio equipment, the cassettes labeled with names, real names, names of missing people. My stomach twisted. I had been right, hadn't I? My research had led me here, to the place where they had disappeared. But I had been too slow to understand, too confident that I was just an observer, just a storyteller collecting pieces of a mystery. I hadn't realized I was walking straight into it. I exhaled shakily and forced myself to move again, this time reaching into my jacket pocket with fingers that barely felt like my own. My recorder was still there. The small, familiar weight of it sent a flicker of something close to relief through me, though I had no way of knowing if it even worked. I turned it over in my hands, my pulse pounding as I slid my thumb over the worn button and pressed it down. A tiny red light flickered to life in the darkness. I swallowed against the lump in my throat and raised the recorder to my lips. "My name is Dylan Foster," I whispered, the words barely more than breath. "If anyone ever hears this, I need you to listen. I don't know where I am. I don't know how long I've been here, but I know I'm not the first. And if I don't get out, I won't be the last." The words felt too small, too fragile in the crushing silence, but they were all I had. My only proof that I was still here, still real. I let the recorder run for a moment longer, the tiny red light blinking like a heartbeat in the dark. Then I turned it off and pressed my forehead against the wall, my breath shaky against the padded surface. Somewhere in the silence I could feel him listening, waiting. There was no way to tell how much time had passed. Without windows, without sound, without even the steady ticking of a clock, time became something shapeless, something that stretched and contracted at random. Minutes felt like hours. Hours felt like nothing at all. I drifted in and out of consciousness, the pain in my head rising and falling like waves, pulling me under before spitting me back out. The silence was relentless. It wasn't just an absence of sound. It was a force, a weight pressing against my skull, sinking into my bones, hollowing me out from the inside. I had never known silence could feel so loud. At some point, minutes, hours, maybe longer, the door opened. I didn't hear it. I didn't hear anything. There was no creak of hinges, no soft shuffle of footsteps, nothing to warn me that someone else was there. One moment I was alone. The next there was movement in the darkness, a shift in the air, a shadow against the barely perceptible glow of my recorder's red light. My body tensed before my mind could catch up, every muscle locking into place as if freezing would somehow make me invisible. But I could feel him watching. He didn't speak at first. He just stood there, his presence stretching out into the silence, filling it like a slow-moving tide. My breath was loud in my own ears, too loud, intrusive in a space that wasn't meant to hold sound. And then, finally, he moved. A soft click. A small light flickered on. A portable lantern, the kind you'd take camping. It cast a weak, flickering glow, revealing him in pieces. Hands first, long fingers curled loosely at his sides, clean but pale, like they hadn't seen sunlight in a long time. Then the cuffs of his sleeves, rolled up neatly just above his wrists, the fabric stiff and pressed. The glow climbed higher, tracing the sharp lines of his shoulders, the narrow slope of his neck, the shadowed hollows beneath his cheekbones. He was older than I expected, somewhere in his 40s, maybe pushing 50. His skin pulled tight over an angular face that was neither kind nor cruel, just controlled, deliberate. Walter Keene. I knew it was him before he even opened his mouth. The man who had vanished years ago, the man who had once built worlds out of sound and then erased himself from the noise. His eyes were a strange, washed-out blue, the kind that almost looked gray in the dim light. They studied me with quiet interest, like I was a puzzle he had been waiting to solve. When he finally spoke, his voice was exactly as I remembered from the recording. Calm, measured, almost gentle. "You're adjusting faster than most," he said. I didn't respond. I couldn't. My throat had tightened, my mouth dry, my thoughts scrambling to process the fact that he was just standing there, talking to me like this was normal, like I was supposed to understand. "You still have your voice," he continued, tilting his head slightly, watching me the way someone might watch an animal in a cage. "That's good. Some of them lost it quicker. They panicked, screamed until their voices broke. But you've been careful. You're trying to hold on to it." I swallowed hard, my fingers tightening around the recorder still clutched in my hand. He noticed. His eyes flicked to the small device, then back to my face, and for a second, a single breathless second, I thought he was going to take it. But he didn't. Instead, he crouched down slowly, leveling his gaze with mine. "Do you know why you're here?" he asked. My pulse pounded against my ribs, but I forced myself to speak, my voice hoarse and unsteady. "Because I was looking for you." A small, almost amused smile touched his lips. "No," he said simply. "You're here because you never learned when to be quiet." The words hit me harder than they should have. I had spent my life chasing stories, digging up truths that people wanted buried, speaking out when silence felt easier. It had always felt like a strength, a purpose. But the way he said it with such quiet certainty made it sound like a fatal flaw. "You think sound is power," he went on, his voice still unbearably soft, the kind of voice that forced you to lean in just to hear it. "You believe noise makes people listen, makes them see what they don't want to see. But you don't understand what silence can do, how deep it goes, what it leaves behind." He reached into his pocket and pulled something out. A cassette tape. It was old, the label worn, but there was a name scrawled across it in black ink, a name I recognized. One of the missing. My stomach lurched. "Where are they?" I forced out, my voice shaking despite my best efforts. "The others. What did you do to them?" Walter's expression didn't change. He turned the tape over in his hands, almost absently, like it was nothing more than an afterthought. "They're still here. he said. In a way. I didn't understand what he meant. Not yet. But I would. Walter didn't move right away. He just held the cassette between his fingers, turning it over slowly, the faded label catching the weak glow of the lantern. The name scrawled across it, James Elroy, was one I recognized, not just from my research but from my own memory. He had been a journalist, an investigative reporter, who had vanished almost 3 years ago while working on a piece about corruption in law enforcement. His disappearance had been a mystery that no one had been able to untangle, until now. I stared at the tape, my breath shallow, my body caught between stillness and the urge to run even though I had nowhere to go. Walter's fingers tapped lightly against the plastic casing, a soft, rhythmic sound that seemed impossibly loud in the otherwise suffocating silence. Then, with a careful, almost reverent motion, he placed the tape on the floor between us. "You should listen," he said, his voice quiet, steady. "It will help you understand." I didn't move. Walter exhaled slowly, as if he had been expecting my hesitation. Then, without another word, he stood, crossed the small space between us, and reached behind me. I flinched, my entire body tensing, but he didn't touch me. Instead, I heard another soft click, a drawer, opening somewhere within the padded walls. When he pulled his hand back into view, he was holding something small and rectangular, a tape recorder. It was old, battered, its buttons worn smooth from use. He knelt down again, his movements careful, deliberate, and slid the cassette into place. Another click, a pause, then sound. Not voices at first, just breathing. Shaky, uneven, then a whisper, hoarse, cracked, barely more than a thread of sound against the relentless quiet. "My name is James Elroy," the voice rasped. "I don't know how long I've been here, but I know what he's doing. He wants to take it all away. The sound, the sense of self. He thinks silence is pure, but it's not. It's a void, a grave." I felt my stomach twist. The voice sounded raw, desperate. Not like a man simply trapped, but like someone who had been unraveling for a long, long time. The tape continued. "He listens, always listens, but he never speaks unless he wants to remind you that you still have a voice, that you're still capable of making sound. It's the only thing keeping you human, but you can feel it slipping. The silence. It presses down. It gets inside you. It makes you forget what your own voice even sounds like. And when that happens, when you finally stop trying to make noise, he knows he's won." There was a rustling sound, then a sharp inhale, like Elroy was trying to keep himself from breaking apart. "If you're hearing this," he whispered, "it means you still have a chance, but not for long. Don't let him take it. Don't." The recording cut off. I hadn't realized I had been holding my breath. It left me in a sharp exhale, my pulse hammering against my ribs. My fingers twitched against my own recorder, still clutched tightly in my hand. I could still speak. I could still record my own voice, but for how much longer? Walter reached down, pressed the eject button, and pulled the tape free. He turned it over in his fingers again, as if it was just another artifact in a collection, then met my gaze. His expression was calm, unreadable. "They all say the same thing," he murmured. At first, I forced myself to swallow, my throat dry, my mind scrambling for something, anything, that would make sense of what I had just heard. "What happened to him?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Walter studied me for a moment, then reached into his pocket and pulled out another cassette, another name, another voice, waiting in the silence. He placed it on the floor next to the first. "Would you like to hear the next one?" I didn't answer him. I couldn't. My throat felt tight, the weight of the silence pressing into my skull, wrapping itself around my ribs like something alive. Walter just watched me, patient, his pale fingers resting lightly against the second cassette. He wasn't in a hurry. He had all the time in the world. And that terrified me more than anything. Because time didn't exist here. Not in the way it should. Without sound, without a sense of movement beyond my own shallow breaths, the minutes and hours blurred together into something shapeless. I thought about James Elroy, about his voice cracking through the silence like a dying thing, and I wondered how long he had lasted before he broke. Walter slid the second tape into the recorder. Another click, another breath of static. And then, another voice. "My name is Lillian Park," the woman's voice murmured, her words slow, careful, as if she was trying to remember how to speak. "I used to sing." The sound of her voice sent a chill through me. It was quiet, but not weak. There was something almost defiant in it, a kind of stubbornness that hadn't been fully worn away yet. "I was loud once," she continued, the faintest hint of something like a laugh buried beneath the exhaustion. "I used to think my voice mattered, that it could change something, that people would listen if I just sang loud enough. But now I don't even know if I'd recognize my own voice if I heard it outside of my head." I clenched my fists, nails biting into my palms, my own breath too loud in my ears. "He waits for you to stop trying," Lillian whispered. "That's the test. He knows that voices aren't just sound. They're identity. They're proof that we exist. He takes that away piece by piece, until you forget who you were before the silence." The recording crackled for a second, and in the background, I swore I could hear something else. Not speech, not movement, just breathing. But it wasn't hers. She wasn't alone when she recorded this. I felt my stomach lurch, my eyes flicking up to Walter, who was still watching me with that same quiet intensity. He wasn't just listening to the recordings. He had been there, sitting in the silence, watching them as they unraveled. Lillian inhaled shakily. "If you're hearing this, it means you still have a voice. But don't let him trick you into thinking that's enough. It won't save you, not unless someone else hears it too." The tape stopped. Walter pressed the eject button, pulled the cassette free, and placed it gently next to the first. He exhaled through his nose, almost like a sigh, and then tilted his head at me. "She lasted the longest," he said, almost thoughtful. "Nearly 4 months before she stopped speaking entirely." My stomach twisted violently, bile rising in the back of my throat. 4 months. I couldn't be here that long. I wouldn't. Something inside me lurched, a deep, primal fear that pushed me to move before I could think. I surged forward, my hands closing around the tape recorder, gripping it so hard my knuckles ached. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't have a plan, but I needed to do something. Walter didn't stop me. He just watched, patient, as I fumbled with the buttons, my fingers slipping against the worn plastic. My own recorder was still in my pocket, but this one had been used by the others. It had held their voices. I pressed play, static. Then, nothing. My heart pounded. I rewound it, pressed play again. Silence. Not even the remnants of the last recording. Just dead air. Walter's expression didn't change, but something in his posture shifted. A subtle tilt of his head, as if he was waiting to see how long it would take for me to understand. He hadn't just taken their voices, he had erased them. Even the proof that they had ever spoken, ever existed, was gone. The fear inside me swelled into something wild, something sharp and desperate. I lunged at him, my body acting on pure instinct, but he moved too fast. His hand shot out, gripping my wrist with an iron strength that sent pain shooting up my arm. I gasped, but the sound was wrong, muffled, like it barely belonged to me anymore. Walter leaned in, his face too close, his voice lower than a whisper. "You're still holding on," he murmured. "That's good. That means I still have work to do." I tried to yank my arm free, but he tightened his grip just enough to remind me that I was weaker, that I was wasting what little energy I had left. Then, just as suddenly as he had grabbed me, he let go. I stumbled back, my breath coming too fast, my chest heaving. Walter stood, brushing non-existent dust from his sleeves, and turned toward the door. He reached for the lantern, and the dim light flickered, casting his shadow long against the padded walls. "I'll give you some time," he said, almost kindly. "You'll understand soon." And then, darkness. The silence swallowed everything. I sat there for what felt like hours, my pulse thudding in my ears, my body curled in on itself. I knew what he was trying to do. He wanted me to fall into it, to let the silence burrow into my mind, to make me doubt my own voice, my own thoughts. I pressed a shaking hand to my chest, feeling my own breath, grounding myself in the only sound I had left. And then, an idea. I fumbled for my own recorder, my fingers slipping over the buttons, and pressed record. My voice, raw and unsteady, filled the small space. "My name is Dylan Foster. I don't know if this will ever reach anyone, but if it does, please, listen." He takes voices. He erases them. That's what he wants. Silence isn't just a prison. It's an execution. But as long as I can still speak, I'm still here. And if I'm still here, a sound. Not my own. Outside the door, a creak of wood, a shuffling movement. And then, something sharp, something quick, a crackle of static that shouldn't have been there. My heartbeat slammed against my ribs. I tightened my grip on the recorder, barely daring to breathe. I wasn't alone. And for the first time since I woke up in this place, I realized something. Walter had always been the one listening, but somewhere, somehow, someone else was listening too. And maybe, just maybe, they were coming for me.